Bibliophiles, and welcome back to Blatantly Bookish. I'm Marissa, and yes, I am wearing a tank top in the middle of winter in New York because my apartment is blazing hot. You can probably hear the heat hissing in the background, like the mad woman in the attic. Anyway, we are going to get on with my January wrap-up. It is only January 27th, but I am filming this early because I am going away next week, and I will probably not have time to film it then. So here we go. If I finish any books in the next few days, they will just be added onto February. So one of the books I finished this month was Sandman Volume 3, Dream Country by Neil Gaiman. This book is the third volume in the Sandman series, which as a whole is about elementals, who are immortal characters, abstract concepts like dream and death, and it's about their interactions and relationships with humans. A prominent theme in the volumes so far is where does creativity and inspiration come from? What determines which creative works will endure, and what is the price for that type of a legacy? Gaiman's works exist in their own reality, and it's as if his inspirations themselves come from a state of consciousness between dream world and our own. This particular volume is almost a series of short stories in graphic novel form, as there's no overarching storyline, which there was in the past two volumes. I just want to discuss two of the stories a bit. There's the story Calliope, which is about a famous one-hit author who is struggling to write his next book and enslaves a muse named Calliope. It's about the possession and formation of ideas and creativity. It makes you wonder about Gaiman's own relationship with his ideas and creativity. And the other story I want to talk to you about from this collection is called A Midsummer Night's Dream. This actually won the World Fantasy Award for the Best Short Story, and it's the first time that a comic was given that honor. The story is literally about a real Midsummer Night's Dream where William Shakespeare is a character that has a contract with the immortal Dream, and his troupe actually performs the play for Dream and the Fae, or fairy folk. Some other books that I read this month but do not have copies of because I already returned them back to the library, as I think I actually have with most of the books on this wrap-up. Those were the first three books of the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett. So in order, those are The Color of Magic, The Light Fantastic, and Equal Rites. This is a YA fantasy series about a world shaped like a disc on top of four elephants, which stands on top of a giant space turtle named Atuin. Doesn't sound like my usual read. It's got wizards, witches, a thriving city named Ankh-Morpork, and death as a character. And somehow, despite featuring totally insane and whimsical premises, it manages to discuss serious topics. He is an author that is very reminiscent of Vonnegut for me, actually, and I've chatted about the books themselves in quite a bit of detail already in my currently reading / impromptu library book haul video. So if you're interested in hearing more, you can go check out that video. But Terry Pratchett is a master of social satire, and these three aren't even considered to be that great to people who have read more of Discworld. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series eventually. And I already have the next 4 books out from the library. Anyway, the next book that I want to talk to you about is My Absolute Darling by Gabriel Tallent. It's a novel about a 14-year-old girl named Julia Alveston, aka Turtle, growing up in the forests of Northern California with her survivalist and abusive father. This is a debut novel that's been going around BookTube lately, and I think that for the most part, people have been giving this book really positive reviews. But I think people either love or hate this book, and I personally did not like it very much at all. It had its high points. The second half of the book was a whirlwind page-turner of a read. The book was haunting and still unsettles me when I think about it, but it also felt really unrealistic to me in its portrayal of abuse. But, of course, I don't really have any personal experience with abuse, so who am I to actually talk about that? It's full of dark, graphic, and disturbing passages, but that's not what I had a problem with in the least. I didn't feel connected to Turtle. She had no voice, no agency in my opinion, and I understand that as a child of abuse, she might not have had those things publicly, but surely she would have had some original thought to herself that the reader would be privy to. And there was just so much description of Turtle and her surroundings, yet I didn't feel that I could picture much of anything at all. I felt that there was such a stark contrast between the coarse curse words of the dialogue and the over-descriptive language of the text, and some parts of it were just so repetitive. I mean, how many times are we going to see Turtle clean her gun? After reading this book, I went on Goodreads to go and say that I finished this book, and I actually stumbled upon Roxane Gay's review of it, and I feel like her review really conveys my thoughts far better than I have just done. I'm just going to read some bits and pieces of her review for you, and I think I will leave the discussion on this book at that. She says, I wanted more interiority from Turtle. The third-person narration was a curious choice, and I felt so much distance from Turtle, and not in a way that felt organic to what I see as the novel's ambitions. And Turtle should be the kind of narrator that becomes canon, tough, interesting, smart, effed up. But because we don't have the interiority she deserves, the potential of her character is never realized. So true. Then she gets onto the description. The excess of description was really off-putting. Like, we get it, it's water in the woods with sparsely decorated house. Calm down with the adjectives. She put exclamation points after all those words. And I am fine with the descriptive writing, but more often than not, the prose offered an excess of description that really compromised the pacing, and despite all the description, it was really challenging to get a real sense of the place. I just started to dread turning the page for fear that there would be more description, more look what I can do with words, which is not ideal. And just so much description did not make sense. It was just word soup. Word soup is just a phenomenal way to describe it, by the way. Okay, she says, there is a baffling moment where Turtle's pussy is described as trim and compact, as an anemone bunkered down, but in the most bizarre way. Why is this here? Also, every time the word pussy appears, it's weird. And then towards the end, Tallent switches to the C word, but it's just as jarring. And when we first meet Turtle, she is cultish, and her hips are wide but slender. Like, dude, pick one. And of course, you know the next line is going to be that she is beautiful, but in a surprising way, right? Sure enough, she is described as an ugly face, she knows, but an unusual one. Sigh, of course. Here's the whole description. She is tall for 14, cultishly built, with long legs and arms, wide but slender hips and shoulders, her neck long and corded. Her eyes are the most striking feature, blue, almond-shaped, in a face that is too lean, with wide, sharp cheekbones, and her crooked, toothy mouth, an ugly face she knows, and an unusual one. There were so many plot threads that it felt abandoned and incomplete. All that energy spent on description might have been better spent on character development and backstory. I love Roxane Gay, and I think her review is absolutely point on. I only read parts of it to you, but if you want to go read the rest, I highly recommend that you do. But if you want to read this book, I guess I also recommend that you do, not from a personal place, but from a place where many, many people have given this book 5 stars, and I'm aware of that, and they've loved it. It just wasn't for me, and it may or may not be for you as well. Moving right along, I also read How to Breathe Underwater by Julie Orringer. This is a beautiful short story collection that featured stories that were only connected by themes of childhood and growing up. As with all short story collections, I liked some of these far more than others, but I think that I truly loved about half of them in this collection. The beautiful things about short stories is that they give you enough information to be intrigued and know what's going on, but all that happened before or after the story is mostly left to the imagination. You're simply privy to a moment, and I think that that's done to some extent in all short story collections, but is done particularly well in this one. I really, really need to read some more short stories. In fact, if you have any short story collections, that you would recommend. I would love to hear about them in the comments because I think I am going to be reading a lot more short stories this year if possible. But back to this collection, I'd like to talk about 3 of the stories. When She Is Old and I Am Famous is a story about a girl confronting her cousin's beauty and the power that it gives her cousin. She contemplates their relationship and how it might change in the future when her cousin is old and she is famous, or when she is old and I am famous, if you are the narrator of the story, of course. In short, when their roles change and her artistic talents are recognized and she is in her prime. In Care, Aunt Tessa tries to take care of her niece, Olivia, while coping with the slow unraveling of her own life. This one was a bit melodramatic for me, but I think it was crafted in a really compelling way. And last but not least, my favorite story, hands down in this collection, was Isabel Fish. This story is about a young girl named Maddie who takes scuba diving lessons with her brother to cope with PTSD of a traumatic event that affected both their lives. These stories were so emotionally engaging, and I quite like this collection as a whole, but I'm not so well versed in short stories, and I really do need to read more and learn more about the form. So those were all of the books that I have finished in January, or at least finished before January 27th while I am filming this, but I'll probably post it later than that, so yes. But I'm about a third of the way through Mansfield Park, you can see right there. I'm really taking my time with this one, obviously. It's a really enjoyable read, but it's a very dense read, and I only read it on the weekends because I am really, really tired when I come home from work and do not have the mental capacity to actually focus on it. And then I also started Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad. I guess I'm also about a third of the way through that one. But I'm really enjoying it, and I can't wait to talk to you about both of these books when I finally do finish them. As always, I cannot wait to hear what you think about anything that I've said or anything that I've read in the comments down below. I look forward to seeing you in another video soon. Bye!